Hilchos Shegagos Perek Chi'i, the laws of sacrifices for inadvertent transgressions, chapter 9. We're done with the chatas. We're done with the sin offering, the chatas kvua, the standard sin offering. Yesterday, we moved on to the asham talui. That's the hanging in the balance guilt offering, which you bring when you don't know whether you did a sin for which you're liable to a korban chatas, but that's also part of the category of chatas. Today, we move on to what's called the asham, the guilt offering. There are a couple of sins that if you do them, you bring a korban asham, and that's the topic of today. It says the Rambam halacha aleph al chamesh aveiros mevi korban asham. For 5 sins, a person has to bring a guilt offering. For hu anikra asham vadai. In contrast to yesterday's asham, which was asham tolui, doubtful, this is called an asham vadai, a definite guilt offering. Shari einei bar mishum safek. You don't bring it out of doubt. You bring it out of definitiveness. When you do this sin, this is the sacrifice to bring. We say it every morning in Ezau Mekayman before we start Hoidu. We have a little paragraph. We say, Ziv Chesham Etzibur Va'ashamais, Elohein Hashamais, and we list all the 5 types of guilt offerings. Ve'elohein, and they are Al Shifcha Charufa, for having relations with a Shifcha Charufa. What is a Shifcha Charufa? So in short, that's a woman who was owned by 2 partners. One of the partners freed her. She's half slave, half freed. As you see over here, she's chained to this guy, but not to that guy. And she's also engaged, the word charufa means consecrated, betrothed, to an Eved Ivri, to a Jewish slave. Very specific state, and if you have relations with her, the punishment is a korban asham. The al hagezel, and for robbery. The al hami'ila, and sacrilege, misusing consecrated items. The al tumas nazir, for a Nazirite who becomes impure, he's not supposed to. Right? One of the things of a Nazirite is that you don't drink wine, and you don't cut your hair, and the third thing is you don't become ritually impure, but he did. One of the ways to rectify that is to bring a korban asham, to bring a guilt offering. And number 5, ala tzaras k'shayithar mimena, on the tzaras, skin lesions. When you become pure from skin lesions, you have to bring a guilt offering. Now, the Rambam just called it an avera. Tzaras is just a condition. So obviously the Rambam is alluding to what he writes elsewhere about tzaras, that you don't just get lesions out of nowhere. The reason a person gets skin lesions is because he did a previous sin. He spoke Lashon Hara, or something like that. And so when you become purified from this sin, as evidenced by the fact that the tzaras goes away, one of the things you have to do is to bring a korban asham, a guilt offering. And the Rambam goes through each one. Al shivcha charufa ketzal. What does it mean? Having relations with the shivcha charufa. Haba al shivcha charufa, says the Rambam, if somebody engages in relations with the shivcha charufa, ben bezadin, ben bishgaga, whether he did so purposely or inadvertently, he didn't realize she was in this state. Maybe asham, the atonement for him is to bring a guilt offering. Says the Rambam, v'hu, when does the person bring a korban asham? Provided that you meet the following 5 criteria. Shatia gedoyla, the woman in question has to be an adult, past bas mitzvah. Umezida, she has to be fully aware of what she's doing and the punishment that it carries. Ubirtzaina, she has to be consensual, not being violated or raped. V'tiya be'ula kedarka, and she has to have already previously engaged in relations in a natural way. Ubigmar bia, and this relations which she had previously had to have been a full relations. The act has to have been completed, fully consummated. Why does all these 5 conditions have to be met for the man to bring the sacrifice? Says the Rambam, kedesha tilke, because if these 5 conditions are met, then the woman in question will get her lashes, which is the punishment for the woman in the case of the shivcha charufa. And Torah clearly links the lashes of the woman to the sacrifice of the man. Shenemar, it says in the verse, bikoides tia, she needs to get whipped. That's how we interpret the word bikoides. And then vehevi asashamai, then he'll bring the sacrifice. He loika v'hu mevi korban. Her punishment is lashes, his punishment is sacrifice. Since Torah puts them together, says the Rambam Malacha Beis, umipi ashmor lamdu. We learn from tradition, shebizman shehi chayeves malkos, hu chayev the korban. Only at a time when she would be liable to lashes is he liable to a sacrifice. Ubizman shehi p'tura min malkos, Who patur min hakarban, but if she's exempt from lashes, he's exempt from a sacrifice. Therefore, what's the Rambam saying? In order for the man to be obligated in a sacrifice, all the conditions that would be liable, that would hold her liable for lashes, have to be met. And she can only get lashes if she's an adult, mazid, consensual, etc., etc. And therefore, only if those conditions are met, she gets lashes, and hence he brings a sacrifice. Halacha Gimel, we have a special, unique halacha. Ben teisha shanim v'yem echad, sheba'al shivcha charufa. Even if the boy involved is 9 years old and up, and he has relations with a shivcha charufa, he loika v'hu mevi karban. That's already enough, significant enough for her to get lashes, and he has to bring a sacrifice. V'yiro eli, it seems to me, says the Rambam, she'enei mevi ad sheyagdil v'yiyeh ben das. That obviously he won't bring the sacrifice now as a kid. He'll have to wait till he becomes an adult, achieves halachic status of maturity, and then he brings the sacrifice. And we talked about this at length the first time that Rambam brought this up in the 5th book, Forbidden Relationships. How could there be a boy who has any type of obligation? And the Rebbe ties this into a general approach of the Rambam to children's mitzvahs or children's performance of Torah acts, that since the father or their guardian is obligated to teach them and to train them to do mitzvahs properly, when they do a mitzvah properly, that mitzvah gets some sort of halachic significance. And so too with the averas. There could be a child under the age of bar mitzvah, but by virtue of the fact that he's involved in a training or doing the avera in the fullest way, he also can get some of the punishment as well. Halacha dalid kvar be'arnu b'hilchos bias asurais. We already explained in the laws of forbidden relationships, mahi shivcha charufa ha'amura b'Torah, exactly how we define what the shivcha charufa is. And as I told you before, she's engaged, she's half slave, half free, and she's engaged to an eved ivri. V'she'enon chayavin ad sheyivel kedarka v'yigmar, and also the obligation only devolves if there's a natural and full act of relations. The fichach, therefore, im amru le'shnayim ba'alta shivcha charufa. If two people come over to him and say, hey, by the way, the woman you had relations with yesterday, she was a shivcha charufa, v'hu eimer lei ba'alti, and he says, no, I didn't. Neman, he's believed. Ve'ene mevi karban al pian, and he will not have to bring a sacrifice based on their testimony. Shaharei hu yedeya im gamar b'yasei elei gamar, because only he knows whether he completed the act of relations or not. V'zesha amar lei ba'alti klemar lei gamarti. And when he says, I never had relations, he doesn't mean to contradict the witness's statement that the relations took place. Of course they did, but he means to say that he didn't complete the act, in which case he's not held liable. Halacha hey abba al shivcha bi'es harbe. If somebody has multiple times relations with the same shivcha charufa, ein chayav ela asham echad, you're only liable one time, guilt offering. Ketzat, what does this mean? One time offering. Haba ala shivcha bi'es harbe bezadin. Let's say a person has multiple relations purposely with the shivcha charufa. Or he has relations with her inadvertently, and then he finds out, and then he does it again inadvertently, and he finds out. Even 100 times, in 100 different lapses of awareness. You bring one guilt offering and it covers all of them, both on the ones performed purposefully and the ones performed inadvertently. That's provided that it's one and the same woman. But if a person has relations with multiple shivcha charufas, even in one lapse of awareness, we have the principle of gufin muchlakin, different entities. Multiple women are involved, so multiple sacrifices will have to be incurred, one for every shivcha. Halacha vav, baal shivcha v'hifresh hashamay. A person had relations with the shivcha charufa, and he put aside a sacrifice that he's going to bring as the guilt offering to atone for himself. And now he has relations again after already putting aside the guilt offering. Now he's liable again, a new one, a new offering for each relation. Because the setting aside of the sacrifice distinguishes one act from the second. And we're going to treat it as if he already offered the sacrifice, then had relations anew, in which case he's for sure liable to bring a separate sacrifice. Same thing if all the relations happened first. He had relations 5 times, under one lapse of awareness, with one shivcha, but he only finds out about one of them. and after finding out, he puts aside the guilt offering, and then he finds out about the second one. It's a new finding out that happened already after he put aside the first offering. He puts aside a second guilt offering. He must put aside a second guilt offering. And even though if you go back to the acts all happened under the same lapse of awareness. Since he only found out about it after putting aside the first sacrifice, we still treat it like having the relations anew after putting aside the sacrifice, in which case you're liable to a new sacrifice. And the reason for all this is because the law of a purposeful or inadvertent act of shivcha charufa is all the same. Halacha Zayin, so that covers shivcha charufa. Now we're moving on to the next one, robbery. Gezel. Al hagezel ketzat. What does it mean you bring a guilt offering for robbery? Kol mi sheyesh biyadai mishav pruta v'mayla mimamen Yisrael. Anybody who's holding on to more than a pruta's worth of another Jew's money. A pruta is about a nickel in today's day and age. Not a lot of money. You're holding somebody else's money. Doesn't matter how it got to you. Bein shegazloi, bein sheganvoi, whether you robbed it in broad daylight or you stole it in secrecy. Bein shehifkidei etzloi, or maybe the guy deposited the money by you. Or he lent you money, or it's a partnership. Any other way, you're holding somebody else's cash. And he asks you for the cash. V'kafar boy, and you deny owing him the cash. V'nishba la sheker, and you swear to substantiate your words falsely. Right, so it says, where's my watch? Say, it never happened, I have no idea what you're talking about. Swear to me that you don't know what I'm talking about. He swears falsely, and then it turns out that it was false. Bein bezadin, bein bishgaga, whether he did so purposely or inadvertently. The way to atone for this is to bring a guilt offering. This is called the asham for robbery. It's clear in the Torah the atonement of the offering doesn't just come from the offering. You have to also give back whatever money is in your hands. If you look in the verses, this is the whole portion of the Asham Gezeles. Talks about a person, nefesh kisechata. A person does a sin, betrays Hashem by denying his friend, either the deposit or the partnership or the robbery or withholding wages, whatever it is. The haya ki echata v'ashem, says the Torah, when you sin and you are guilty, the heishiv es hagzela asher gazal. First thing you have to do is return what you did, and then after that, v'es hasham yavi. Then you have to bring the guilt offering. In other words, the guilt offering only works if you've already returned the money. But not the extra fifth. See here, it says also, in the verses here. You have to add a fifth. When you return the principal, you have to add a fifth. That fifth is not essential to the atonement of the guilt offering. In other words, you can bring the guilt offering once you've returned the principal, even if you haven't added yet the fifth. Says the Rambam, I'm not getting into it at length over here, we already explained in the laws of oaths, when will you be liable for this oath? To bring the guilt offering, when you'll be exempt from this oath. We also explained which ways would hold you liable to multiple guilt offerings based on the amount of oaths that you made. Or if you're only going to be liable only one. The Rambam over there was talking about cases where, if you talk to a bunch of people, they all say, you owe me money. And then you say, I swear I don't owe to you, not to you, not to you, not to you. It's multiple oaths. You may incur multiple guilt offerings. Or if one guy attacks you for multiple things, he says, you stole money and you owe me money and I deposited your money and I have a partnership with you, and you deny each and every one of the claims, that in some cases you have to bring multiple guilt offerings, in some cases only one. But the Rambam says, I'm not going into it now, we already discussed it back then. And that is the second category of the asham. Now the third category. Al hami'ila ketzat. What about misusing hektish, misusing consecrated items? Kol haneh mishav pruta mina hektish bishgaga. Anybody who derives benefit, the worth of a pruta, from something belonging to the temple treasury, inadvertently, machzir mashenena. First of all, he must return the amount that he benefited. V'yosif chaimesh, he has to add a fifth. V'yakriv asham v'yiskaper, and then he has to bring a guilt offering, and that's what achieves full atonement for him. And that was also covered in a whole set of laws, end of last book, the laws of sacrilege. Same as the robbery. Bringing the sacrifice and returning the principal, those are essential for the atonement. Adding the fifth, while you have to do it, it's not essential to the atonement. Halacha tes ha'eichel midavar shemayalin by b'chamisha tamchuyin behelem echad. A person ate something which is subject to me'ilah, belongs to hektish, it would be sacrilege for eating it, and you eat it in 5 different bowls. Behelem echad, under one lapse of awareness. Afal pishu mizevach echad, even though all the 5 bowls came from one sacrifice, in yesh b'chal achila v'achila shav pruta, if every eating which you did is the worth of a pruta, chayav asham al kol echad ve'echad, you're liable to a separate guilt offering for every one. Sha'atam chuyin mechalkin b'me'ilah. Even when it came to chatas, we said bowls don't differentiate. When it comes to me'ilah, different bowls are different entities and are carrying their own liability. It's like eating multiple types of food. Even though when it comes to excision, and hence the chatas, they're not divided. The reason for this is because we treat me'ilah with extra stringency. When it comes to me'ilah, if you remember, somebody who offers pleasure is considered like the person who himself derives pleasure. Right? If I offer you something from hektish and you eat it, I'm liable. So therefore, that's an extra stringency, and therefore there's an extra stringency over here as well. There's another stringency, that me'ilah can cross over a lot of time. If I have some benefit today, and some benefit in 2 weeks from now, they can combine. If an agent carries out an agency, the me'ilah doesn't attribute itself to him, it attributes itself to the sender. Which all these stringencies do not apply to other prohibitions. Therefore, over here also we apply a new stringency that different bowls are also considered to be multiple entities of prohibition. Anybody who is liable for an asham vadai, by the way, we don't even get into the nazir and the mitzayra, because those each have their own full set of laws. Nazir in the 6th book, a whole thing on that, and mitzayra in the next book, God willing, when we talk about saras, we're going to have a whole thing on that. But the Rambam says now, general rule. Anybody who has to bring an asham vadai, he needs to find out about his sin, and only then can he offer the guilt offering. How is that possible? Very good. So first I'll just translate. If you offer the sacrifice before you find out, and then you find out afterwards, this means, obviously he had a certain doubt. He wasn't sure if he robbed, if he withheld the money, or he wasn't sure if he had sacrilege. Later on, he finds out for sure that he actually did the sin. The offering which he brought before doesn't count. He has to bring a new one. Says the Rambam, another thing, that any sin for which the punishment is, or the liability is, a definite asham, echad hamelech, be'echad koyin mashuach, oisharam ha'aretz shavin bay. It doesn't matter if you're a king, or the high priest, or a regular guy, it's all equal. The Rambam is saying this to contrast with chatas. In chatas, we saw in chapter 1, that if you're a king, you bring one type of animal. If you're a high priest, another type of animal. Regular guy, a third type of animal. But when it comes to asham, all people across society bring the same type of animal. Halacha Yud Aleph, another general rule. Any sin for which you'd be liable to bring a definite guilt offering, if you're in doubt whether or not you did it, pater miklum, you're totally exempt. We don't have the concept of an asham tali. Asham tali only exists for chatas sins, not for asham sins. Therefore, if somebody encounters a case of a doubtful sacrilege, he used something which he's not sure if it belongs to temple treasury or not, no liability at all, as we explained in the laws of me'ilah. A person has 2 pieces of meat in front of him. One is totally mundane, unholy, and one is holy. You ate one of them, you don't know which one. This is a doubt about me'ilah. Pater, you're exempt, as we just said. If you ate the second one too, now there's no doubt. Now you for sure ate the hektish piece. Maybe asham al me'ilah say you have to bring a guilt offering for the me'ilah which you for sure committed. If somebody else eats the second one, now neither one knows who ate the hektish. Nobody has to bring anything because again, for doubt, even though hektish was certainly consumed here, but everybody is in doubt. No asham for a doubt. Halacha Yud Gimel chaticha shel chelev v'chaticha. Let's spin the variables a little bit. Here, this is totally kosher and totally not kosher. What if you have chelev, that's forbidden fats, and hektish? So either way, it's a sin. The chelev is a chatas sin, hektish is an asham sin. So says the Rambam, ochal achas mehen, if you only ate one of them, maybe asham tali mishum chelev. You have to bring an asham tali. Why? Because maybe you ate the chelev, which carries chatas. Now that you're in doubt about a chatas, you bring an asham tali. Ochal es hashniya, if you ate the second one, now you for sure ate chelev and you for sure ate hektish. What do? Maybe chatas ala chelev, va'asham ba'adeh shel me'ilah ala hektish. You bring a sin offering for the fat and a definite guilt offering for the me'ilah. Ba'acher va'achal es hashniya, if somebody else ate the second one, so there's only two doubts now, af hasheni maybe asham tali, both of you have to bring an asham tali, but nobody brings an asham for sure for the me'ilah because nobody knows for sure that they ate the hektish piece. Chaticha shel chelev, v'chaticha shel chelev hektish. What if there's forbidden fat and then there's forbidden fat hektish? So one of them carries just a chatas prohibition, one of them carries both a chatas and an asham. So as we had yesterday when it comes to asham tali, same thing over here. It says that Rambam, ochal achas mihen, if you ate one of them, so you for sure ate chelev, maybe chatas, you have to bring a sin offering. Ochal es hashniya, achar, shenedalei al harishayna, if you ate the second one, after finding out about the first one, separate lapse of awareness, maybe shtei chatois, v'asham ba'adeh al mi'ilasei. You have to bring two sin offerings, because both pieces were forbidden fat, plus you for sure ate the hektish, guilt offering for mi'ilah. Ba'acher v'achal es hashniya, if somebody else came and ate the second one, so nobody knows for sure who ate the hektish, so nobody brings the asham, but both of you for sure ate chelev, sin offering. So zeh mevi chatas, v'zeh mevi chatas bilvad. Each one only has to bring a sin offering. Hilchos says the Rambam, you'll have a question. How could one piece carry forbidden fats and hektish? That's a later on introduced prohibition. Later prohibitions don't devolve on earlier prohibitions. Says the Rambam, we already explained in the laws of forbidden foods, me'ezeh tam noisaf isur hektish al isur chelev. Why in this case does the hektish prohibition take effect over and above the chelev prohibition? And what did the Rambam explain over there? The Rambam explained it's called an Isur Moisif. The scope was enlarged. While it was forbidden fat, the only thing that you couldn't do with it was eat it. But you're allowed to have benefit from it. You can sell forbidden fats. But once it became hektish, now it's also forbidden to have any benefit. So the scope was enlarged. If the scope was enlarged, it can also take effect on the original piece. And now you have both prohibitions, chelev and hektish. And the same principles would apply in all similar prohibitions. If you have two coming together, and then you have two pieces, one has both prohibitions, one only has one. So as each person, or one person eats one or both, these same laws will apply in terms of how many sacrifices you have to bring.